that we've been continuing to follow all week long here on our show. So first off, I do want to ask you, within your expertise, what is your thought process on what we have seen in Cuba within the last couple of days? Does this surprise you? A lot of people, saying that this is not just because of the coronavirus pandemic and its handling. This is years in the making. So what can you tell us?
Absolutely. First of all, let me express my solidarity with the people of Cuba and with the diaspora here in the United States and all over the world. The tragic events of 11 have been in the makeup for more than 6 decades. As we know, Cuba is the only still communist regime in the whole Western Hemisphere, and its policies have failed to the people, have failed politically, have failed economically.
Now, Dr. Jamison, how did we get to this point? I know you just kind of touched on it, but like I said, this is years in the making, and over the course of these last couple of days, we've even stopped getting information from the island nation because they've restricted internet access. So really, how did we lead up to this point? What do you discuss in your classes? What do you teach your students when it comes to talking about Cuba?
Absolutely. Particularly, the problems have been aggravated, particularly when the current president, Miguel DiazCanel, became president when Raúl Castro left the scenes in 2018, 2019. Actually, now he concentrates all power. He's not only the president, but he is the chief of the Communist Party. He's the chief of the armed forces. So all power is in his hands. There have been certain elements, of course, external to Cuba that have aggravated the situation. But it would be simplistic to say that it's just an economic cry. Yes, it's correct. Many things have happened. The pandemic has aggravated Cuba like it has many other places in the world. Sustained economically by Venezuela, that help has really diminished because Venezuela itself has a lot of issues itself. And you have a lot of policies externally that haven't allowed for the people to get what they need. So the cry seems to be a cry for against the economic crisis, against shortage of foods, against shortage of medicine, electricity blackout. But if you listen carefully, the slogan of these protests had been the word freedom, libertad in Spanish, freedom, which actually goes beyond just wanting to demand what they rightfully need economically, but where they are demanding is pretty much a right to freedom of expression, a right to freedom to peaceful assembly, a right to freedom of religion, all those rights that we are so familiar and we treasure so much in the Western democracy.
Dr. Jamison, we have gotten feeds here and there from Cuba. I've actually personally seen some videos on Instagram. I know that internet access is restricted, but the feeds that we have gotten, it shows law enforcement arresting people, getting out their weapons, trying to be violent with people that don't have any sense of or they don't have any way to retaliate. So going off of what you just said, can you talk about the officials and kind of their response to these demonstrations?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's not a surprising response. All totalitarian repressive governments respond in the same way when people peacefully want to protest and demonstrate, which is brutally going against them. You are correct, because we don't have unlimited access. We have very limited access through the internet. We have bits and pieces. All of us have seen, partially what happens, but we are very concerned. When I say we, I say the international community is extremely concerned, from the United Nations and the head of the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights to NGOs like Amnesty International and others, and governments around the world, is what happened with those demonstrators. Some of the numbers place them in the hundreds, some of the numbers place them on more. They have been arrested, we don't know where they are. So the immediate request should be to demand from the Cuban government Where are they and why have they arrested and brutally treated these peaceful demonstrators?
Dr. Jamison, they are currently under the power of Miguel DiazCanel. Can you talk about their president? What has his administration been like compared to Fidel Castro? Have you noticed a difference, especially within your profession, from their reign? A lot of, talks of how the country has changed since the change of power.
Well, we like the Castros or not, and certainly in the West we do not, they had some legitimacy that came from the revolution. Miguel Diaz-Canel doesn't have that reservoir of legitimacy. He's been in the military. He's been a man that has not had, the like and the support of the people. On top of that, he had serious difficulty in addressing the real needs that have been aggravated now with the pandemic. So he is in a position that he has to give some concessions, and there is a great opportunity internationally to push him to give concessions to the people that need to be heard. By the way, these protests that culminated on Sunday are not unique. They've been happening in the last 4 or 5 years. Brave individuals defying the orders not to protest, going on the street and demanding what rightfully all people need, which is freedom and the decency to have a good economic standard.
Dr. Jamison, I'm playing some video here of demonstrations that have, erupted in Miami, Orlando, Tampa. We've seen them in Mexico. What can you say about the international support that is being felt around the globe for Cuba right now, especially, in the Miami area where you are joining us from? There's so many Cuban Americans fighting for their, this island nation right now.
The support is not surprising and overwhelming. You have governments around the world condemning what happened and what the images that we all seen, and the right of the Cuban people for their freedom. That support will continue, but what happens next is what is more important. How do we channel the support to bring and help the Cuban people bring real change? And that is going to be a little bit more complicated. I see it in 2 ways. We have an immediate request right now to demand what is happening with individuals that have been imprisoned or tortured, or who knows, with these individuals that protested now, and also to have immediate access to meet some of their immediate needs. But in the medium and long term, we need to help the people of Cuba bring about the change that for so long the diaspora and the community around the world wanted, which is the end of the communist regime in Cuba.
I want to ask you, Dr. Jamison, because it's been an interesting angle that our team in Tampa especially has been covering, especially in, the South Florida area. Some are now thinking that Florida may face a huge influx of migrants fleeing from Cuba. Do you see this being a possibility?
Well, it could have been if we still have the rule of the wet foot, dry foot, which was one that as long as Cubans could touch American soil, they, to legally stay. That no longer exists since 2017. So it will be as the law stands today, if Cubans try to arrive to our shores, there is no legal way to host them and to have them. So I am not sure yet if we're going to see that influx right now because of the change in policy in the United States.
Dr. Jamison, is there anything else you want our viewers to know as we are about to go into another weekend of expected demonstrations around the nation?
I think that one of the things is we need to have a unified support for the people of Cuba. It is through their own civil society and empowering the groups within Cuba, the NGOs, the church itself, who have made a pronouncement also in support of the demonstrator. There are many elements within Cuban society that we can help bring together to bring change. I know some in the Cuban American community would like to see a direct intervention. It's very unlikely that that will happen. So what would be the other ways that we can support the needs that are so urgently, the things that are so urgently needed in Cuba right now will be something that we need to work together with the Cuban people inside the island.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Dr. Giselle, Professor of Political Science at St. Thomas University, we thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox with your insight. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. A huge thank you to all of the experts like Dr. Jamison.